Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Sian. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more. There are loads of helpful videos on this channel. I'm sure you'll find something that you like. I have for you what I read in July. Now for some reason I could not get going this July. It took me till about the 12th, 13th of July to actually read anything, like literally to pick up a book. I just had a bit of a blip at the beginning of the month. And then somehow I managed to read 5 books in the rest of that time. So I've done pretty well since then. I'll start with the first book I read this month, and it is called Why Mummy Swears by Jill Sims. Now I hadn't read Jill Sims' blog before, and I haven't read her first book in the series. This book follows the kind of life of Ellen, who, if you know Jill Sims' blog, you will, I assume, know, and her little poppets. They're called Peter and Jane, and Ellen is kind of struggling with whether or not she wants to return to work and looking for a job, and she has the summer holidays looming down on her, and it's a funny book. It's relatable. Jill Sims writes that kind of chaos of children really well, and you totally can see, you know, you're kind of there. But I didn't really enjoy this book. I felt it was very well written, the story was easy to follow, but I also just found it a bit negative towards certain groups of mums, or towards mums who've chosen certain ways to live their life. I felt like this book was kind of being just a bit mean, really. There's a full review over on my blog, but you know, it just wasn't for me. It clearly wasn't the kind of book that I'm going to enjoy reading, and yeah, so I'm probably going to get shot down in flames for saying I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it. When I filmed my June What I Read, something really cool happened to me. One of the authors of one of the books that I'd reviewed got in contact and said, would you like to read my new book? It's out next week and I loved your review, so would you like to read it? So I got sent a copy. It is In the Dark by Cara Hunter. It's not just any copy, look. Oh, not on that page. It's signed. So a huge thank you to Cara Hunter for sending me this book. It's called In the Dark, and if you saw my last wrap up, you'll see I reviewed Close to Home, which I loved and had this incredible twist at the end. This is the second in the D.I. Adam Fawley series, set in Oxford again, and it starts with a guy renovating his house, and they discover a body in the house next door. Turns out the house next door is owned by this kind of old man who has dementia, and the body is that of a young girl, and she is alive, and there's also a baby in there, but she's clearly been imprisoned in this kind of dungeon, in this cell downstairs. And again, it's a really well written book. You're given kind of sprinkles of clues throughout the book as to who might have done it, and then each point where you just think, oh hang on, that's the person, that's the person, it twists and you end up completely changing your mind on pretty much everything. And again, the twists in this are fantastic. I love the way that it's written, that keeps you kind of gripped into it, but the fact that these characters keep changing, so characters who you felt really sympathetic for, you end up just being like, what? I don't want to give too much away, but it is a fantastic book, and it's obviously still got the kind of life story of Adam Fawley going through it as well, and what's happening with him and his wife. And again, don't want to give too much away, but it's quite nice that you've got that kind of familiarity running through the book, whilst you've got this kind of crazy crime scene, all this kind of stuff. They bring in old cases. There's loads and loads of things which are kind of plonked into this book. It's a really good read. It's a quick read. It probably took me a day and a half, largely because I couldn't put it down, but I would definitely recommend reading this, and thank you so much for sending it to me. The third book I read this month is part of the Bookish Mamas book club, and I'll leave a link below in the description if you want to come and join us. It is called Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and this book was not the kind of book I necessarily would have picked up to read, but oh my goodness, I couldn't put it down. This is a big book and it's got relatively small writing, and I finished it in just over a day and a half. It helped that I was away for that couple of days and I could just sit and read because the kids weren't there. But I'm not entirely sure how I describe how incredible this book is, but I think this book is going to be being taught in schools. It's that good. It's the kind of book that changes your perspective on life, and it really, really makes you think and question what you know. There are three main characters, Deli, Amari and Iman, and each chapter is kind of devoted to those characters throughout the book. Not in any like specific order, but you get each of their stories throughout and how their stories intertwine. Zelly is part of the Magi clan, and they have this incredible white hair, and they used to have magic until the king took it away. And when they had magic, they were more powerful. Currently, they are kind of overlooked. They are people who are subject to violence for no reason. They are people whose lives are not as good as the other people who live in that kind of kingdom. And it is a kingdom. There is a king who rules over them all. And it's just an incredible story of race and hypocrisy and racism. And I just think you have to read it. It is a gripping read from start to finish. It's not the kind of book I would normally have picked up, but I absolutely loved it. I was totally blown away by this book. Go and read it now. The fourth book I read this month is called Lullaby by Layla Slimani, and Layla Slimani is a Moroccan French author, and this book has been translated. I think it's also called The Perfect Nanny, and you can see from the front it says, "The baby is dead, it only took a few seconds." So this story follows the lives of two people, Miriam and Paul, and they're married, and Miriam returns to work as a lawyer. She works long hours. Her husband Paul is a recording artist. He also works long hours. So when Miriam gets this job, she realises they're going to need a nanny if she's going to be able to go back to work. They employ this nanny called Louise, who's only in her 40s, so she's not an old nanny, but she's kind of very perfect looking. She's always kind of described as like a doll, having doll-like features, wearing this Peter Pan collar, and she seems too good to be true. And she does all their cooking, all their cleaning, you know, she does everything. You know from the front page of this book, and in fact the cover, that a baby is going to die. And in the first few pages you know that both children have been killed and the nanny has tried to kill themselves too. The rest of the story is this kind of chilling look into Louise the nanny's life and where she's kind of falling apart and how fragile she is and how she lives in complete poverty compared with the family that she's nannying for, and she just lives this different life. The people who she's nannying for don't know anything about her personal life. They don't know where she lives. They know she's a good nanny from a reference that she had from a former employer, but it's just a very disturbing story, and it's also a bit disappointing because there's no real end. You never really get the motive, which made me just frustrated. But it's a book that left me feeling shocked. And the fact that a book can do that is amazing. So I did enjoy reading it. I don't know if enjoy is the right word. I found it really difficult to read because of the topic. You know, it's not exactly an enjoyable read from that perspective, but it's incredibly well written, and you know, it makes you feel things whilst you're reading it, which is obviously an amazing thing for a book to do. Whew. Right, the fifth book I read this month, another really happy one, is called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. And Paul is a neurosurgeon. He's spent his whole life kind of devoted to neurosurgery and science, and he wants to know about death and life and where these two boundaries kind of meet and what happens when you're faced with death. And then Paul gets terminal cancer, and this book is basically his journey through having cancer, how it affects him as someone who is a medical profession, how hard it is to kind of relinquish the control of his care to his doctor when he is a doctor and he's trying to kind of think of everything next. You know, he's trying to think what his next step is, what treatment he could have, and he's researching it all. And obviously as a doctor, that's what he does. And he goes back to surgery and neurosurgery, and it's an incredible book. It's a really, really, I don't want to say sad book, because it's not a sad book. Paul doesn't get a chance to finish writing the book before he dies, and I think there's a definite element of poignancy that it's his wife who's written the epilogue at the end and explained what happened to Paul and how he died and who was with him. I think it's a really interesting read because it comes at the idea of cancer from a different perspective, and we all know how horrific cancer is. We all know people who've died from it, and we all know people who have suffered from it, and so it's a really good read. But prepare to cry. It made me cry just when I didn't need it to, when I had like makeup on that then ran. But it's definitely a book that you should read, I think. And that's it, 5 books this month. Already halfway through another book for August, but I don't know how I'm going to get on with reading this month. I think I've read quite an eclectic mix this month, which was really nice. And I've read some really, really brilliant books, which is amazing, obviously. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, make sure you click on the little bell so you get a notification when I upload a video. Right, I will see you soon. Bye.